Our body is sending signals you ignore every single day. That feeling that something is slightly off, the fatigue that doesn't go away with sleep, the bloating that happens for no clear reason, the mood that shifts without explanation. Conventional medicine looks at you and says everything is normal, the labs come back within range, but you know you don't feel right. This video is not about miracles, it's about biochemistry. It's about what happens specifically inside your body when you consume 2 tablespoons of moringa powder every day, and why the most important effects of this plant are the ones nobody is talking about. What moringa does that other videos don't cover. Most content about moringa lists nutrients, they talk about vitamin C, calcium, iron. You already know that. But nobody is telling you what those compounds do when they interact with each other inside the human organism. Moringa contains a group of molecules called isothiocyanates, and these compounds have a very specific function. They cross the cell barrier and activate a protein called NRF2, which works like an internal switch for antioxidant defense. It's not an antioxidant coming from the outside to attack free radicals. It's your own body being instructed to produce more defense on its own. This is completely different from taking any common antioxidant supplement. You are not supplementing, you are reprogramming a cellular response. When this NRF2 switch is activated consistently, and consistently here means exactly daily use, not occasional, your organism begins to reduce a process called low-grade chronic oxidative stress. This process is invisible on routine lab tests, but it is associated with accelerated tissue aging, a drop in mitochondrial energy, and silent inflammation that compromises everything from sleep quality to mental clarity. What happens in the first 7 days? In the first 7 days of use, what changes is not visible in the mirror. It happens in the digestive system. Moringa contains compounds that modulate the gut microbiota. Specifically, it favors the growth of butyrate-producing bacteria. Butyrate is a short-chain fatty acid that serves as direct fuel for intestinal cells. When these cells are well-nourished, intestinal permeability decreases. This means that substances that shouldn't enter the bloodstream, bacterial fragments, poorly digested proteins, stay where they belong, in the intestine. The result is not necessarily a dramatic digestive change, it's more subtle. Many people report that the bloating simply stops throughout the day. That diffuse, mild, constant discomfort, it just fades. This has a consequence that goes far beyond the gut. When intestinal permeability is increased, the immune system enters a state of permanent alert. It keeps processing threats arriving through the intestine all the time. This drains immune resources. By reducing this leakage, moringa indirectly frees the immune system to work more efficiently on other fronts. The effect on the nervous system. Here is something that very few pieces of content address. Moringa contains tryptophan, an amino acid that is a precursor to serotonin. But the most relevant thing is not the amount of tryptophan, it's the context in which it is absorbed. When the gut is inflamed, the conversion of tryptophan into serotonin is compromised. Part of that tryptophan is redirected to a metabolic route called the kynurenine pathway, which produces compounds that, in excess, are associated with anxiety and low mood. By reducing intestinal inflammation, moringa creates the conditions for tryptophan to follow the right path. It's not moringa producing serotonin, it's moringa removing an obstacle so your body can do what it already knows how to do. This explains something that many people who use moringa describe but cannot name: a sense of mental lightness that appears over the weeks, not euphoria, not artificial energy, a kind of stability that gradually settles in. Mood fluctuates less. The stress response becomes a little more calibrated. This is not on supplement labels, it's not in nutrient comparisons, but it is in the mechanisms. Comment down below what state or city you're watching from. I want to understand where the people who truly care about their health are coming from. What happens in the blood? Moringa contains compounds that inhibit an enzyme called alpha-glucosidase, the same enzyme that some glycemic control medications try to block. This enzyme accelerates the breakdown of carbohydrates into glucose during digestion. When it is partially inhibited, glucose absorption happens more slowly and gradually. The glycemic spike after meals is attenuated, and this has consequences that go far beyond blood sugar control. Frequent glycemic spikes are associated with vascular inflammation, with energy fluctuations throughout the day, and with a metabolic state that favors fat accumulation, especially in the abdominal region. What is important to understand is that this effect is not dramatic in a single dose. It builds with daily and consistent use. The organism does not receive a shock, it receives an adjustment. And adjustments, when maintained, produce structural changes. That is how real physiology works, unlike what health advertisements promise. Moringa also contains compounds that favor the production of endothelial nitric oxide, a molecule that relaxes the walls of blood vessels. It's not an immediate effect like that of a medication, but with continued use, there are studies showing modest and consistent reductions in systolic blood pressure. Modest does not mean irrelevant. In cardiovascular health, modest and sustained changes have real clinical impact. What happens in the bones and joints? Moringa is one of the most dense plant sources of bioavailable calcium, but it's not the calcium that most people need to hear about. What matters is the combination. The plant simultaneously contains magnesium, phosphorus, and vitamin K, all necessary for calcium to be absorbed and deposited in the right place, in the bones, not in the arteries. Supplementing with calcium alone without these cofactors can be counterproductive. Moringa delivers the complete package. In the joints, the isothiocyanates we mentioned earlier play another role. They inhibit pro-inflammatory enzymes called COX-2, the same ones that common anti-inflammatory drugs block. The difference is that isothiocyanates do this selectively and without the gastrointestinal side effects associated with those medications. This does not mean moringa replaces medical treatments. It means it can be a real ally in controlling low-grade joint inflammation, the kind that doesn't show up on lab tests but that you feel in the morning stiffness, the discomfort when climbing stairs, a sensation that your joints are heavier than they should be. What happens to the skin? The skin is the organ where moringa's systemic effects become most visible over time, and also the most overlooked in discussions about this plant. The zeton compounds present in moringa are plant cytokinins that stimulate skin cell proliferation and slow down cellular degradation. In practical terms, this means the skin's renewal cycle is maintained more actively. It is not a superficial cosmetic effect. It is a metabolic effect that happens at the cellular layer. Combined with the reduction in oxidative stress that we mentioned, the result is skin that responds better to the environment, less reactivity, less diffuse redness, less tendency toward irregular oiliness that is often a disguised inflammatory response. People who use moringa consistently frequently notice this effect before they perceive changes in other areas. It is the first visible sign that something is changing internally. Tell me in the comments, what region or city are you watching from? This helps me understand who this content is reaching. How to use the 2 tablespoons correctly. 2 teaspoons. Not tablespoons is the dose that appears in most of the literature on daily use of moringa powder. This corresponds to approximately 8 to 10 grams. More than this does not mean more benefit, it means more burden on the liver, which needs to process the bioactive compounds. Moringa, like every medicinal plant, has a therapeutic window. Exceeding that window does not amplify the effects, it can only overload the elimination organs. Timing matters more than it seems. Consumed on an empty stomach or at the beginning of the morning, moringa has greater bioavailability because it does not compete with other compounds for intestinal absorption. Mixed in warm water, not hot, it better preserves the isothiocyanates, which are heat-sensitive and degrade at temperatures above 60 degrees Celsius. Mixing with citrus juice, on the other hand, can enhance the absorption of the non-heme iron present in the plant. Small details that make a real difference in results. People using anticoagulants should speak with their doctor before starting use, because the vitamin K present in moringa can interact with this type of medication. This is not an absolute contraindication. It is a variable that needs to be monitored clinically. What was presented here is not a promise, it's a mechanism. It's the difference between saying moringa is good for you and explaining why, how, and in what context the human body responds to this plant. Knowledge like this changes the way you make health decisions because you stop following trends and start understanding what is actually happening inside your organism. If you made it this far, you are not the kind of person who consumes health content passively. You want to understand. And it is exactly for that kind of person that this channel exists. Drop a comment below with the city or state you're watching from. I want to see the map of where the people who truly take care of their health are located.